Have you ever wondered why we celebrate New Year on January 1st? Well, it wasn't always so. There's been a lot of toing and froing over the past 2,000 years before this date was consolidated. Welcome to Intrigued Mind, where today we will go back in time to discover why January 1st is the day that we celebrate the coming of a brand new year. The earliest recorded celebrations of New Year's were made by the Babylonians in around 2000 B.C.E. These ancient people held a festival that went on for several days in honor of the rebirth of the natural world. They called it ENKUTATASH, and it took place at the beginning of spring. By the time of Rome's legendary founder, Romulus, the Romans had developed their own calendar based on the phases of the moon. It is believed that the Romans developed their lunar calendar using knowledge that came to them from the Babylonians and the Greeks. However, this 305-day-long calendar, which was based on the 10-month-long phases of the moon, did not match with the solar year, which at 365 days ran closer to 12 months. At this point in time, the Romans celebrated New Year during the Vernal Equinox, which is one of the 2 days each year when day and night are of the same length and generally falls around March 20th in the northern hemisphere. Enter Numa Pompilius, who according to legend reigned from 715 to 673 BCE as the second king of Rome after Romulus. It is Numa Pompilius who is credited with the establishment of a fixed calendar. This calendar used calends, which was the first day of the month, and is where we get the word calendar from. Nonis, which was the 9th day before the Ides of each month, and Ides, which was the day that fell roughly in the middle of each month. The leftover months that had not previously been accounted for in the old calendar were simply known as winter, and the calendar year commenced in March, which coincided with the start of spring. Numa Pompilius added 2 extra months so that the length of the calendar now matched the length of a solar year. The first month was named Janus, after the Roman god of time, transitions, beginnings, and endings. The second month was named Februarius, in reference to the purification ritual that the Romans undertook on the 15th of February each year. Thus, the calend was the first day of January, which was the first month. So it made sense that the first day of the new year was on January 1st. This concept, which was loosely adhered to in Rome, was consolidated in the year 153 BCE, when January 1st was chosen as the day on which the new consuls of Rome were inaugurated. This was during the years of the Roman Republic, when the position of consul was the highest-ranking political office in Rome. So, it was an important day for the Romans. By the time 46 BCE rolled around, there was a new sheriff in town, so to speak. Just don't mention the Ides of March. And Julius Caesar was the head of the Roman Empire. Caesar worked with Greek mathematicians to fix an error in the calendar. There were too many leap years, so these were reduced to one every 4 years to use up the leftover time from the 365 days that made up 1 year, which was 0.25 days. After this amendment, it took 455 days to get things back on track, but they got there in the end. January 1st was still considered the new year, and with the expansion of the Roman Empire, this custom was adopted throughout Caesar's vast lands. Once the Roman Empire collapsed and Christianity took hold throughout Europe from the 4th century CE onwards, the custom of welcoming the beginning of a new year on January 1st was cast aside in favor of a date that was sacred to this new religion, March 25th, the day of the Annunciation, when the Archangel Gabriel appeared before the Virgin Mary to tell her of the Immaculate Conception. Indeed, the liturgical calendar was now the most important calendar to Christians. January 1st was not an important feast day for this religion, so they did not mark the coming of the new year with this date. This liturgical calendar was predominant throughout Europe in the early medieval period in terms of special days, used alongside the Julian calendar to mark the passage of 1 year. It was not until the year 1582 that the Pope at the time, Pope Gregory VIII, decided that the Julian calendar needed an overhaul. Up to this point, the number of leap days in the Julian calendar was still causing problems, especially at Easter time, which was supposed to fall on the Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. Incidentally, this was the same time that the ancient Babylonians celebrated ENKUTATASH, the festival of rebirth. Just as Easter is the time of Jesus' resurrection, Christianity always tried to match their important times of the year with pagan celebrations to make the transition from paganism to Christianity more appealing. But that is a story for another video. Back to Pope Gregory. He had his calendar printed and issued in a papal bull, which meant it was canon law, and therefore had to be adhered to. This papal bull stated that January 1st was once again to be considered the first day of the new year, and it listed all of the feast days in the Christian, now Catholic, calendar in order, from January 1st up until December 31st. However, by this point in time, the Catholic Church was not the only Christian superpower in town. Italy, Spain, and Portugal had no problems getting on board with Pope Gregory's new calendar. But Protestant countries shirked the use of the Gregorian calendar, because why should they adhere to something issued by a Catholic pope? So the Protestant countries of Europe, Britain and the British colonies stuck with the Julian calendar. Incidentally, even today, the Eastern Orthodox Church still uses the Julian calendar. Finally, in the year 1751, the New Style Act calendar was issued in Britain, which declared that New Year's Day would be celebrated on January 1st. This calendar was an act of the British Parliament. Lord Chesterfield was the man behind it, and he had the good sense to see that it was time for Britain and the British Empire to adopt the Gregorian calendar. This calendar was also known as the Chesterfield Act, or the British Calendar Act of 1751. It was declared that this act was for regulating the commencement of the year and for correcting the calendar now in use. The New Style Act calendar changed the start of the legal year from March 25th to January 1st. It kept Christmas Day on December 25th and acknowledged that Easter was a movable feast. In 1753, it was all smooth sailing, and after a few thousand years of argy-bargy, most of the world was finally on the same page. Whew. Now, that's not to say that the whole world celebrates the New Year on January 1st. The Chinese still adhere to a Lunar New Year and celebrate the New Year on the day of the first new moon for that year. Having said that, the Chinese do celebrate January 1st as a national holiday, in keeping with the Western world. So in effect, they have two New Year celebrations. And in Ethiopia and Eritrea, New Year, known as ENKUTATASH, is celebrated on the 11th of September. So now that you know why we celebrate New Year on January 1st, thanks to Numa Pompilius, Pope Gregory VIII, and Lord Chesterfield, let's take a look at some wonderful and woeful things that have taken place in the Western world on this most auspicious of dates, other than the beginning of a new year. Number 1. In 404, the last gladiatorial fight took place in Rome. They had been banned by a Christian emperor after a monk was stoned to death by the crowd for trying to stop a gladiatorial fight some years earlier. Number 2. In 1660, English civil servant Samuel Pepys started his diary, which goes on to be the most valuable written record of life in England in the 17th century. Number 3. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln freed 3.5 million enslaved African Americans under the Emancipation Proclamation. Number 4. In 1892, Ellis Island opened, thus paving the way for 12 million immigrants to come to the United States. Number 5. In 1901, all of the colonies and territories of the Great Southern Land formed a federation, making Australia one nation. Number 6. In 1962, 4 young Englishmen went for an audition at Decca Records, but they were passed over for another band, with the label stating that they have no future in show business. These rejects were called the Beatles. Number 7. In 1983, a computer network used by universities and research labs called ARPANET changed its connection protocols, and the internet was born. January 1st is a time of renewed hope in the future, when we wipe the slate clean and start all over again with the best of intentions to have a successful year. So, wherever you are and however you celebrate New Year, let's raise a glass and toast to the fascinating story of why many of us celebrate New Year on January 1st. For more videos on the most amazing forgotten parts of our history, be sure to subscribe to the Intrigued Mind channel, like the video, and leave your suggestions in the comments below.